So this is part one of chapter 53 on population ecology. And so as we begin, we want to take a look at where do populations fit in the scheme of the different levels of organization and the environment. And as you guys know, as a review, we start with the individual organism, and then groups of that organism make up a population. So this is our second level of organization and ecology. And what we're going to be looking at, again, the definition of a population, is that it's a group of individuals of the same species that live in the same area at the same time. And what this will imply is that they're going to be relying on the same resources, they're going to be interacting, they're going to be interbreeding because they're the same species. And it's important to keep in mind that they're going to be described by their boundaries, which is another word for the range, and the size of the population. So population ecology is going to be exploring how biotic and abiotic factors influence the density, the distribution, the size, the age structure of populations. Basically, it's the study of a population in relation to its environment, both its biotic and abiotic factors. So an example we have here is the number of loggerhead turtle hatchlings that survive their first journey to the ocean and how that can be affected by both biotic and abiotic factors. So actually, let me show you that picture here. So this is just a little picture showing loggerhead turtles. And they've been studied extensively. They're found along the Florida coast. And what has been found is that the number of hatchlings that actually survive and make it to a viable adulthood varies significantly from year to year. And so this has been the source of a lot of study in population ecology to figure out what factors are influencing the difference in the viability and actually survival of these. And so there are several conditions that affect how these turtles, actually how many are going to hatch and how many will reach the water. And so some of those factors include how many females return to lay the eggs, and that varies by a factor of about 20. Also, from year to year, there's a variation in how much predation occurs by raccoons in terms of raccoons getting to the nests of these. And sometimes as much as 10% of the hatchlings or the eggs are eaten by raccoons, but in some years almost 100% can be the object of predation. Another factor is human impact on the environment for these hatchlings, in that man-made light sources have been found to disorient the hatchlings so that they don't make it to the ocean. Even though they may hatch, they don't get eaten by predators, but they still can't make it. So those are all examples of both biotic and abiotic factors that are going to affect the population size. So why do we have population ecology? It has both practical and scientific goals. The scientific goal is that we are trying to understand the environmental factors that influence the size of the population. And the practical outcome of what we learn from that includes managing populations, whether that is increasing the population size if it's an endangered species, for example, or decreasing the population size if it's a pest or an invasive species. And sometimes it's just maintaining a stable population size, such as the fishery management that occurs, so that we get a maximized and sustained yield from year to year. So how is a population studied? What we look at are two factors. We look at the density of the population and the dispersion of the population. The density is defined as the number of individuals per unit area, or the volume, the size of that population. Dispersion, on the other hand, is the pattern of spacing among individuals within the boundaries of that population. Density is the most difficult to measure, and in most cases it's not practical, maybe not even possible, to count all the individuals in a population. You can imagine all the factors that would go into this. The population is hidden. For example, if it's a burrowing population, like prairie dogs or gophers, things that you don't necessarily see, or if they're nocturnal animals that you can't even see them because it's dark out. So it most often is not going to be possible to count them all. So what we rely on instead is estimating the population size through different types of sampling techniques. These techniques can be extrapolation from taking a small sample, taking an index of the population size. So an index would be something that represents a number of individuals in a population. So, for example, a nest. How many nests can you count? That would be an index. The third type of technique is called the mark recapture method. And we're going to look at that a little bit more in depth here. So determining a population size using the mark recapture method involves a series of steps and a little bit of math. And you should be familiar with how to calculate this. So scientists capture and then they tag and release a random sample of individuals in the population. So what would come to mind is very obvious. We've seen a lot of this in nature shows where they'll capture different animals, bears, birds, any sort of animal that they want to study, and they'll put some sort of tag on them, whether it's a radiometric tag or just even a physical tag. Another animal that is tagged a lot in this area are mountain lions. So we keep track of them in our community, in our ecosystem here in the central area here of the East Bay. So we represent that random sample of individuals with a small letter S. Those marked individuals are then given time, they're released, and then given time to mix back into the population. And then after a period of time, a second sample of individuals is captured again. And this number of individuals is represented by the small letter N. What is noted then is how many of those in this second sample actually have the tag or a mark, and that's represented by X. So then the math that we apply is that N, a capital N, which is the population size, is estimated to be the product of the first sample times the second sample divided by the number that are marked in the second sample. Now, density is the result of an interplay between the processes that add individuals to a population and whatever is influencing or causing individuals to be removed. So the things that we look at, there are 4 different ways that this can occur. We can have immigration, which is the influx of new individuals from other areas into the population that we're looking at. Or we have emigration with the E, which is the movement of individuals away or out of the population. We have, of course, birth and death as ways to add or take away from the population's size or density. So this is a graphic demonstrating how we can take a look at that. And so again, you can see our population here is the center number of birds, and we can either have death taking away, or emigration, taking away. So these birds are flying away to another population. Here, a predator is going to take away part of the population. And then we have ways to add to the population density, either birth or immigration. So again, we're going to break down the factors that are affecting population and population ecology, always by what biotic or abiotic factors are going to influence that or affect the population size and density. The other is going to be, the third factor is intrinsic, and we'll take a look at that as well. But some of the things that can affect population size and density that are abiotic, meaning non-living, are sunlight and temperature, how much water is available, the soil, the nutrients. If it's an herbivore, it could also be, well, that would actually be biotic, so never mind that one. So those would be some of the abiotic factors. Could also be the weather. Biotic factors are going to be anything living. So the food that's available, also, if they're herbivores, the plant matter that's available, which is also living. Competition for resources, any sort, either within the population or outside. Predators, parasites, and disease are all biotic factors. The intrinsic factors are going to include things that are within the individuals in the population, which are adaptations that make them able to better survive or not survive. So an adaptation we'll study very in depth when we get to evolution, but it's going to be something that helps the individuals of the population have a better survival rate. So this is asking you to turn to the student next to you, but since you're probably at home, I'd like you to write down what you've just learned. So summarize this, and I'm going to be asking you to do this throughout the year because I don't want you to just listen and have things go in one ear and out the other, but I really want you to process and make what we're discussing, what you're learning, be part of your knowledge base. So some of the things, as you're summarizing it, what characteristics do a population or do population ecologists use to study a population? So what are the two major areas that we're going to look at when we're studying a population? And what factors can affect density? Break them down into the different types and give an example of each. And write these in your notes to be turned in with your reading notes. And remember to pause the video when you're doing this, and then when you're done, go on. So when we were talking about the dispersion of a population and also the density, we were talking about the boundaries of that population. So just by definition, when we're discussing in ecology a population, we want to look at its range. What are the geographic limitations? And these actually can include both biotic and abiotic factors. So it's not only geographic limitations that are, for example, a mountain or an island or something that would very much define geography limitations. But it also is the things like temperature or rainfall, food, predators. These are all things within the range. They're things that are going to very strongly influence the population's density and its dispersion. There are, of course, going to be changes in that range from time to time, especially when we're discussing biotic factors. Obviously, as living things change and fluctuate, that's going to affect whatever population is interacting or depending on those biotic factors. We also have a changing environment physically. We have for example, the melting